What is going on? I just wanted to quickly talk a little bit about the now official hire of John Harbaugh, the 21st head coach of the New York Football Giants. It's very interesting. I am obviously excited about this hire, but it's a tempered excitement, right? It's not like we're back, we're gonna go to the Super Bowl, and I think it's because I've been too gun shy about all the losing that has happened and how many times have we been tricked into thinking, hey, we're back, right? We thought we were back with Joe Judge, we thought we were back with Brian Dable, and in fact, even after that first year with Brian Dable, everybody was like, oh, we know we're back now. He won Coach of the Year, we won a playoff game, and in all those situations, it fell apart. So there's always a chance that things could fall apart, and then the Giants are going to really look dumb because they gave a coach $20 million a year to ultimately have the same success they've been having with coordinators. Um, but a few things that I think makes this different. Obviously, the one is that he is already a head coach, John Harbaugh. He's been a head coach. He has the experience, and he has won games and obviously a Super Bowl in this league. So at the very least, whether you think he's a good coach, whether you think he's not a great coach, whether you think he's worth $20 million, at the very least, he's not going to be learning on the job. He knows what it is to be a head coach. He knows all the little details that you have to take care of, including travel and training and off-season stuff. He knows all of these things, which the past four coaches, with the exception of Pat Shermer, was briefly a head coach and didn't really do well. But Ben McAdoo, Joe Judge, Brian Dable, they were learning on the job. And New York City is not the place to learn on the job. You need to have a guy that commands respect, that knows what to do. And again, this doesn't mean it's going to be successful, but at least you take away one variable, which is he doesn't need to learn how to be a head coach. He already understands that part of it. And as far as people are saying, like, well, you're not going to win a Super Bowl with John Harbaugh, honestly, we may not. He signed for 5 years, and I think he might not re sign after that. I think he might just do the 5 years and either retire or move on. So the question is, will the Giants win a Super Bowl in 5 years? And it's like, maybe. I mean, any team could win the Super Bowl. But I don't. That's not why he's here. And if I had to, I'd say I lean more towards no. We're not going to win a Super Bowl. But he's here to raise the floor of how bad we could be, right? Bring credibility back, bring discipline back, bring accountability back, and to raise that floor to say, look, we're not going to have 4-win seasons. We're not going to have 5-win seasons. We might not win the Super Bowl. Who knows? Next year we might not even make the playoffs. But if we can be 9-8, and that becomes like the floor of how bad we can be, and then maybe we can grow from there and maybe go win 10 games in the next season and maybe win the division, then make the playoffs, go deep into the playoffs. That's what he's here for. He's here for a progression. He's here to raise the floor of how bad we can be, as well as shake some things up in the organization in terms of org structure and all that, which he's already done in his contract, which is why it took so long to kind of shake the Giants out of their old ways of doing things, which hasn't been successful in almost 15 years. That's why he's here. And the hope is, let's just say after 5 years, he decides to move on to another team or just retire from coaching because he'll be like 68 years old, that the blueprint will then be in place where the next coach that steps in, and I believe the next coach after Harbaugh might not have the pedigree of him, but it will be an established head coach, like a Sean McDermott, who just got fired today, right? Somebody like that, who's coached in the league for 5 or 8 years, maybe hasn't won a Super Bowl, but has had winning teams, understands how to be a head coach. I think the Giants are done with first time head coaches for a while. And to be fair to the Giants, over the last few coaching cycles, there really hasn't been that slam dunk hire that the Giants missed out on. I think there was I heard the list of coaches at the time that the Giants hired their last four coaches. One was Mike Vrabel when he went to the Titans. We could have had him, but he was an unknown commodity, so it was like a 50-50 if he was going to be good or not. And there was one other coach, I can't remember now, but who ended up, he was a head coach and was good. So basically missed out on two candidates in the four coaching cycles. Every other head coach was an unknown, like the four that we hired, and ended up being okay to not that great. So I don't fault the Giants for hiring some of the guys they did, because there wasn't like there was an Andy Reid or a John Harbaugh or a Mike Tomlin on the market. So it's not like they missed out on that guy and then had to settle. It was just kind of all coordinators and whatnot. And as I just mentioned at the beginning, we got Brian Dable last time, and we went 9-7-1 and won a playoff game, and he won Coach of the Year. So we thought we had our guy. That one actually looked like it might stick, and then things just fell apart because he didn't hold players accountable, and I guess his spiel got old real quick, and then players didn't buy in. So hopefully we won't have any problems with that with John Harbaugh. And again, he's not here to win the Super Bowl. He's here to change the culture. He's here to raise the floor of how bad the Giants can be. Kind of like with the Ravens, right? The Ravens didn't win a Super Bowl since Joe Flacco, but every year they were good. Even this past year, they make the playoffs, but the last game of the season mattered, right? And they were a field goal away from beating the Steelers and going into the playoffs. A field goal away. Wouldn't it be nice, even if we don't make the playoffs in a year, to have a meaningful last game that might get us to the playoffs, or even a meaningful game in December that we're playing that could get us into the playoffs, right? So that's what he's here to do. Baby steps. Now, of course, could we make the huge turnaround that the Bears made or that the Patriots made, where all of a sudden now we're going deep in the playoffs next year? Absolutely, we could. It depends on the next step of Jackson Dart and how well everybody meshes with Harbaugh. But that really should be longer term. Short term, we need to change the culture. Players, there needs to be a very specific plan that the coach puts in place for players, whether it be new players or veterans or everybody. And it's like, this is the way we do things, and you're either on board or you're out. And that's it. Where I feel like with all the previous coaches, because they didn't have the cachet that Harbaugh has, it was a lot of deferring to players and catering to players instead of just imparting your own regiment onto them and saying, this is how you win football games. And to be fair to those coaches, how could they do something like that when they haven't won football games, right? Brian Dable was never a head coach. How could he impart something like that and say, this is how we're going to win football games, when it's like, bro, you haven't even won a football game as a head coach the first year he came in. Now you have a guy who can do that. And so that's really why he's here. So all this talk about, they're not going to win a Super Bowl, it's fine. It's fine. It's not why he's here. He's here to bring the Giants back to respectability, right? He's kind of here like, and again, I've said this before, I'm not a Joe Shane defender. He could be fired. He could stay. I don't really care. But a lot of people complain about his drafts and whatnot. But he did a lot of work behind the scenes in revitalizing the Giants front office and using analytics and doing different scouting procedures that we as fans don't see. Okay, and I think that's what John Harbaugh is going to bring to coaching, right? We might watch him coach on the sidelines and say, it's not that much different than any of the other coaches the Giants had. No, but he could be building something behind the scenes, credibility, accountability, changing the way that we decide what players are going to be brought up from the practice squad, what players are going to be cut, right? These are all things that need to be restructured on the Giants, and he's the type of guy with the gravitas to be able to come in there and shake things up. So along those lines, I think John Harbaugh will be successful. If you're measuring his success by, we have to go win a Super Bowl in the next 5 years, it's possible, but unlikely. And I would not try to measure his success with that. The Giants are, remember, Tom Coughlin won 2 Super Bowls with the Giants, but when he took over, the Giants weren't as bad as they are today. Okay, they had just gone to the Super Bowl in 2000. Yes, they lost, but that was only 4 years before Tom Coughlin got there. Okay, they were in the Super Bowl. So, yes, they had a bad year in 2003 to bring Coughlin in and to have the 4th overall pick, in which they drafted Phillip Rivers and then traded with the Chargers and everything. But they weren't that far removed from being a good team. Here, we're almost 10 years removed from really being a good football team. So there's a lot more work to do. And so I like the hire. I am still keeping I'm excited. I wanted a former head coach, a guy who has been a head coach. That's what you need in New York. You can't have a guy. It's fine. Some of these other, the Browns, the Jacksonville, you want to bring in first-time head coaches and let them learn on the job. That's fine. You can do that out in Jacksonville. You can't do that in New York. Okay? And it's not because all of the media, it's not that much worse in New York. It's not that the media in New York is that much worse than the media in any other market. It's that the New York market, everybody sees it, right? Like, I'll be honest, I didn't even know who the coach of Jacksonville was until they made the playoffs. And then I was seeing clips of like the coach and kind of the weird stuff that he said, when he like first got hired. I don't know, he just kind of acted a little weird. And then they were showing those clips when the Jaguars made the playoffs. But up until then, I didn't even know who their coach was. If that same coach was on the Giants, the whole year would be like, wow, this coach for the Giants is really out there and all this other stuff. So it's that the New York market, whatever happens, gets pushed around the entire league, whereas in other markets, it doesn't. So that's why you can't have a guy who's learning on the job and making all these mistakes and doing everything. You need a guy who's all business. And so that's what you're going to get with John Harbaugh. Again, doesn't mean a Super Bowl, but it does mean a climb back into respectability. And we'll see what he can do with Dart. Now, it could be the next Coughlin-Manning era with Harbaugh and Dart and a few other pieces. We're building up that pass rush, and that's what we had when we had the success with Coughlin. So it could mirror that. At which point, maybe we could get to a Super Bowl in the next 5 years, like they did in that era. But don't count on it, and don't measure Harbaugh based on that. Measure it based on how are the Giants moving forward. Do they have more respectability? Is there more accountability for the players? Are we actually winning games consistently, right? How about start with, can we win back-to-back games against teams that aren't actually trying to lose? How about we start there? Because the Giants haven't done that except for the end of this past season where the Raiders and the Cowboys really didn't care about winning. Aside from that, I don't remember the last time we won 2 back-to-back games. Oh, the beginning of the 2022 season, right? We had a couple of stringed wins there. Okay, so let's get back to that, where we can win 2, 3, 4 games in a row. Where we cannot only win 4 games in a season, maybe be 9-8. Let's get back to that first, then worry about the playoffs, then worry about the Super Bowl. All right? Let's see what happens now in free agency and the draft. It'll definitely be fun. And one last point, it is nice to see that we got Harbaugh, who was obviously every team's opening number one candidate, right? Every team had an opening that was their number one candidate. We got him, and now every other team is scrambling. Right? You just saw Atlanta hired Stefanski. Every other team now is scrambling to get the leftover coaches because they all wanted to put their effort into trying to get Harbaugh. And it's nice to finally be on this side of it, where we won a guy that we wanted, versus on the other side of it where somebody else got our guy and now we have to scramble to find somebody that we want, right? So we got a big win there, and he could have went anywhere. He chose the Giants. So that should be a good vote of confidence for the players and the organization. Let's move that momentum forward, and hopefully this big win in the offseason compared to other teams can start to translate into big wins on the field.